Hey there guys, welcome back to another video. I know it's been a while from I made another video, but what I wanted to do today was just go over some lenses. And so today what I got is the Sony 1.8 50mm FE. I also have the Samyang 1.4 Sony E-mount or Rokinon if you're in the States like I am, but I still got the Samyang one. And lastly is the 50mm 1.4 Sigma lens with a Sony native E-mount. So jumping right into the comparison between them, I posted up on my Instagram story a picture of all three of them of the same object at the same distance and everything. And what I wanted to see was that who thought which lens took the better picture. And so the way it came out is that about 50% of people liked the top photo, under 1% liked the second photo, and then about 48% liked the last photo. And just to go over this, the top photo is taken with the Sony 50mm 1.8. The second photo is the Samyang 1.4, but I took this also at 1.8, so it's an equal matchup. And the same thing with the Sigma 1.4. I also made sure to stop that down to 1.8. That way there's an equal comparison between the two. And what you can see is that, well, at least what I noticed was that the Sony lens at the top there, it was able to take a really great photo. There's nothing wrong with it. I feel like the contrast is just a little bit too much to my liking. But other than that, it took a really good shot. Second lens, the Samyang, I feel like it also did a good job, but then there's a slight yellowish tint to them, to the entire photo, and to like almost every photo that it takes, there's a slight yellowish tint to them. But other than that, I think it could do a little bit better on the contrast, but I still like it. And then lastly, the Sigma, I think the contrast was on point, the sharpness was definitely on point, and it's better at the color reproduction than the Samyang. What I also did was post up a photo between the Samyang and the Sigma lens at 1.4 at their widest open aperture to see if people are able to tell the difference. I posted a picture of that on Instagram, and it looked like about 79% of people favored the Sigma lens, and the remaining 21% favored the Samyang lens. And I asked a few people for why they chose that Sigma lens, and it was because the Samyang lens, they noticed that it had a slightly softer look to it. It wasn't as sharp, as well as that yellowish tint that seemed to be very present in every picture that you take with this lens. Okay, so moving into the next item that we want to look at is just how much noise does each lens make. On the outside, just in general use cases, how much noise will you hear when you're using the camera, as well as how much noise can be picked up from the camera when you're using the lens if you decided to use the audio from the camera. So we'll first start out with the Sony 50mm 1.8. I'll show you what that sounds like now. And the next lens we can look at now is the Samyang 1.4, and I'll give you a taste of what that looks like too. Okay, and then lastly, we can just look at the Sigma 1.4. So just hearing how much noise the lens makes really can be a deal breaker for some people, so I'm glad to share this with you. I don't particularly find the Sony 1.8 very particularly bothersome. However, when you take a look at the Samyang, either if you're just shooting pictures with it or you want to capture video, it's just annoying because the way the focus motor is just ridiculous. It gives me headaches. it's so high pitch. But when you take a look at the Sigma lens, it's perfectly fine. You literally can't hear a thing no matter what you're focusing on. It's very silent. So definitely it's a plus for me. Okay, so last thing we want to do is just get into some photo quality, and I got a few pictures here in Lightroom that I want to pull up. Hey guys, so jumping right into it, we can go into a direct comparison about some photos that I took, and that way you can also see them as well. And so right now I'm comparing the 50mm FE Sony lens to the Samyang 1.4 lens. Of course I took this picture, both of them at 1.8, so they can be of equal comparison. And you can see, at least what I'm able to notice here, is that around the center of each of the balls here, that the Samyang looks just a tad bit softer on some objects. Not completely, but just something to note there. Even though it's stopped down to 1.8, it is still taken an overall higher amount of light than the Sony lens. And then if we now compare the 1.8 to the Sigma lens, we can see that the Sigma lens is just ridiculously sharp. You can look at just this, for example, this piece of wood right here on the first end on the ball, and compare that to how that looks on the left side there, and you can see that it's a little bit more detailed on the Sigma lens. As well as, if you notice this, there's a stick, a piece of stick just here. It's very well pronounced and able to see on the ball compared to the Sigma lens there. Okay, so looking at, say, another photo here, looking at the Samyang now to the left versus the Sony on the right, we can see that the Sony lens definitely is able to produce a much sharper image, because you just focus on the numbers here, you can see that it's a little blurry, and although you're still able to read it, it's not as sharp as the Sony lens. So that's something to note. And as well as, you can see that the battery connectors here are a little bit sharper. Now if we're looking at the Sigma lens to the left and versus the Sony lens, we can see a very big difference now. Sigma lens definitely the sharpest out here, so you're really able to see the difference right there. As for everything else on the battery, I can leave that up to you, but you just for overall sharpness, you can definitely tell the difference already. Okay, so with all this knowledge now, hopefully this was everything that you needed to know about these 3 different lenses, and definitely I made my decision on which lens to keep. Hopefully by watching this video you'd be able to look at the pros and cons and see as to whether or not one is better than the other, especially based on price. The Sony lens being the cheapest and then the Sigma lens being the most expensive. You can really see in how they produce photos as well. But with that said, hopefully this helped you out. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.